St Paul's School Gateshead has long harboured a secret which sits in the back row of a classroom, a secret which could not stay hidden despite a little girl's disability. Examples of Samantha Dagg's artwork adorn the room. This montage of Australian wildlife won a competition run by the Royal Blind Society, and that design has now become a Christmas card. A Christmas card? What, with no snow and no Santa? Well, Sam set me straight on that score.
Yeah, well, it doesn't snow in Australia, and the cards are like an Australian competition, so do Australian things.
She probably, knowing Samantha, would be happy if she didn't win it. She doesn't like any extra publicity or anything like that, but she's very talented. It's not the first award that she's won, and I think it's great not only for her and the school, but it's also good for Newcastle.
Newcastle Lord Mayor John McNaughton will use the card on his Christmas mailing list. That means Sam's card will be seen around Australia and around the world. And the small print on the inside ensures that a shy 11-year-old's secret is out. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
In the Hunter, just over 4,600 students are sitting for the HSC this year. That's 600 more than last year. Yesterday, around 300 students had their music exam. Today was compulsory English. Most found the exam to be what they expected and what they'd studied for. With the 2-hour exam over, it was relief all round. So what did you think of the paper?
It wasn't too bad. It was quite good, actually.
It was really good. It was very fair, and Part C was a bit different than what I expected, but I reckon I did good.
I thought I didn't prepare myself enough, but I found out I went all right.
It's pretty easy, really. Easier than I thought.
For the teachers too, it's a frustrating wait to see what the papers offer. But again, the response was good.
The contemporary paper does have a lot of material which could overwhelm some of the students if they weren't prepared for it. But the 2-unit general paper and the 2-unit related were both very, very straightforward, and I'm very happy with them.
But the students aren't getting too excited. Their first major paper may be over, but there's still another 4 weeks of exams to go.
I still got more to go. I wouldn't be happy yet. Until when I finish, I'll be happy. Not now.
Barina Street residents woke to a tragic scene. The 3-bedroom weatherboard house at number 19 swamped by emergency services. A blaze had completely gutted the house, sweeping through the rooms within minutes. Neighbours frantically tried to control the blaze with their garden hoses, but there was little they could do. Intense heat and bursting windows forcing them away.
Certainly once it gets started in a normal house like this, very few minutes before the whole house is involved.
Trapped in one of the bedrooms and killed, 2-year-old Beau Rumble. His parents and their 3-year-old son managed to escape and were airlifted to hospital for counselling.
Seen a helicopter flying past, and I seen 2 little girls run up to the alleyway, and they turned around and said, "Tracy's house is alight and Beau's burnt to death." So I raced around here and I seen the house and I started crying.
While friends and neighbours tried to come to terms with the tragedy, scientific police and the fire investigation unit were scouring the charred remains of the house, searching for clues. Just 2 months ago, the family had survived a fire at their Jesmond home. Neighbours say they were planning to move out of Raymond Terrace next month. Matthew White, NBN News.
New ground was broken by the Inverell Council in attempting to attract the major decentralisation project to the town. The three-stage development would have realised several hundred jobs. $1.25 million has already been spent on construction and site works, but in a joint statement issued by former directors of the company today, it seems the project is in doubt. The company is now in the hands of receivers whose intentions remain unclear. Southern Cross Foods was to use Inverell as its major packaging depot for some of Australia's best-known snack foods, as well as the manufacture of confectionery lines. A meeting of interested parties will be held soon.
After a long season back home, Australian footballers struck out one last time and beat England to retain the World Cup. 3 nights went over, but only one played in the Cup decider.
It was an amazing experience to go out there in front of that many people. I mean, the chances of playing a match in front of a crowd that big in Australia just won't happen because we haven't got the facility. But it was an incredible experience and one that I'll never forget. I doubt any of the other players will either.
To the surprise of many, Sargent's front row partner Paul Harrigan was left on the bench. Sarge agrees the Chiefs' omission was unfortunate, but mateship only stretches so far.
I thought Chief would make the squad somewhere, but obviously, despite the fact that they're teammates, when you get in that situation, you've got to do the best thing for yourself. And I went over there with the intention of doing my best to get the spot, and fortunately for me, that's the way it panned out.
Likewise, fullback Brad Godden didn't get a Guernsey, forced to watch Balmain's Tim Brasher debut in the number 1. So finally, season 92 closes, but for the Knights, next year starts next week.
With the results we got this year, I think everyone's going to be keen to put in a good hard off season and hopefully go a little bit further next year.
Adamstown's Anglican Church has had many facelifts in its time, but the foundations go back years, 100 years in fact, and to mark the occasion, parishioners are throwing a party. It's the anniversary of the day the first stone was laid, and the chapel's centennial celebrations will continue for another 8 months.
The original church was a wooden structure, and it was built in 1892 and 1893. We're commemorating that event this evening. And the little wooden church stood as it was up until the 1960s when they decided to brick it. And they bricked the east end and then they bricked the west end, and it stood for many years with 2 brick ends in the wooden middle.
The psalms, readings and hymns that christened the site 100 years ago will be recited as part of tonight's celebrations. And like all birthday parties, well-wishers are determined to enjoy the occasion.
My dear, it's going to be a very splendid occasion. And if there's one thing that we can do well, and that is enjoy ourselves.
It's been a big year for the trio, a part of Newcastle's rise to prominence with a spot in the semi-finals and then selection for Australia in the World Cup touring party. For Bradley Godden, extra joy at being home. Only married 24 hours before flying out to England, and now with Jacinta, the honeymoon can begin. Big Sarge went on to be a member of the team that won the World Cup, while Chief missed out, but the experience was worth that dose of disappointment. And all 3 players lent their support to the charity night with auction items up for grabs. A further bonus for the travel-weary players, time to relax before they join their Knights teammates for pre-season training.
For years, the notorious Swansea bends along the Pacific Highway have been the bane of drivers, but by the end of the month, this will be the new style of motoring in and out of Newcastle. The finishing touches are being put on the $24 million project in readiness for the opening on November 28 and 29. Most of the development has been completed, including extensive landscaping. More than 15,000 trees and shrubs have been planted along the road. The main talking point has been how the two sections of the road will be joined at the Pacific Highway. The lower half of the road will be opened on the Saturday morning, the 28th, traffic being diverted at the junction with the old highway. By the next morning, the road will be completed and ready for use, replacing the S's of Swansea with a smooth, straight drive. Matthew White, NBN News.
Despite 11th-hour attempts to postpone the auction by the City Council and groups calling for the land to be designated free public space, the sale went ahead at City Hall just after 11.
Intending developers are alerted to the possibility of archaeological relics on this site.
The land is not affected by a listing of the National Trust of Australia.
With no firm evidence of convict artefacts buried on the site of what was an early jail, commercial interests took over. The owners of the land, the state government, eager to top up its coffers with a sale. Some thought differently. Others made their bids with hard cash.
40 after now. At 260,000. At 2,260,000. It's against you now.
Among those bidding, a deal had been struck. The present owners of the motel and its land lease, along with another interested party, pooled their funds for a combined bid. It paid off.
2,300,000 for the third and final call.
The people of Newcastle.
So,
we think it's the most beautiful site in Newcastle. We think it's an ideal site for tourism, and we think that we can improve the site dramatically and do it sympathetically with the surrounding environment.
The group with Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong interests will soon begin redeveloping the existing motel and may make use of the bus depot site as a residential development in about 2 years' time.
Our intention is to proceed straight away.
Well, what sort of investment will that mean?
It'll mean an investment of about $5 million.
After toiling deep in the earth, grimy-faced coal miners at Newvale return to the surface for talks with Bob Carr to try and ensure their futures aren't cast into darkness.
We all want our jobs, and please help us.
The state-owned colliery is to close in January at the cost of 114 jobs, while another 80 positions are to be cut from the nearby Awabba pit. The miners told the opposition leader Newvale's closure will not only decimate their lives, but the local economy as well.
I won't be going to the shop and spending my money, and for every person, every coal mine that's out of work, there'll be 3 go, so she'll be a dead old place around here.
The angry miners also distributed copies of a parliamentary Hansard from only 3 months ago, in which Energy Minister Robert Webster is quoted as saying there are no jobs at risk on the Central Coast at this point of time. To help save their jobs, Mr Carr assured he would push for Newvale to be at least kept open on a care and maintenance basis and would call for an inquiry into the planned sale of the Munmore estate mine. But beyond that, there were no guarantees.
I'd like to be able to say to you that we've got the power as an opposition to force the government to keep the mine open and operating. We haven't got that.
After a visit to the home of New Vale miner Keith Shaw to listen to the family's unemployment fears, Mr Carr asserted 4,000 jobs could be created in the Hunter by bringing forward $230 million in capital works programs. Acting Treasurer George Souris has dismissed the proposal as a debt binge that would only deepen the recession.
Ralph Rangers starred for Australia in the Grand National Test Series against the American teams a couple of years ago and then chose to sit out when most drivers and promoters opted for super sedans. But the love of oval track racing has drawn the father of two back to the track in a brand new Falcon. And it's new everything, from the 355 cubic inch Chev motor to the rear. And with builder Des Disney, he's happy with the end result.
Well, the car's a little bit different to most cars that are running. We've got a completely different rear end to what we used to run before, and we're not really sure how it's going to work, but we think it'll work pretty well.
Tomorrow night's one-on-one match racing series will be a perfect way for Ranger to test the capabilities of his Falcon.
You know, I think we can go as quick as them, but it's just a matter of who's going to sort of get their nose in front into a corner, I'd say, before you'll really know how quick anybody's going to go, but I think we'll do okay.
Solos and sidecars will also feature. For those crazies on three wheels, if racing is as keen as it was the last time, anything can happen. A strong contingent from Gunnedah, Lismore and Queensland will be out to dent the mettle of the locals.
These apprentices have all been touched by the recession. Through no fault of their own, they were laid off before they finished their training.
We could see a need for assisting young people who were fairly demotivated by not being able to continue that trades training.
Kevin Armstrong came up with an idea which allowed the apprentices to finish their training while building houses for the needy. New South Wales Department of Employment and Wyong Shire Council funded the project. After 12 weeks on the job, the 15 apprentices today presented the Department of Housing with the keys to 2 houses they've built. For carpenter Luke Manning, it's been a valuable opportunity.
Confident I can build a house. I'm getting that confident I can go and build one of these houses. You learn that much. You've got that responsibility on you that you have to learn, so and it's interesting, you want to learn it.
The work's not over though. The group is building another 6 3-bedroom cottages for the Department of Housing. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The 4 soldiers were treated at the site of the accident. It's believed the army truck they were travelling in was rounding this bend on the New England highway when it went out of control and hit a tree. The impact sent it spinning again, spilling its load of groceries before stopping. The 20-year-old driver and a passenger who was travelling in the back of the vehicle were taken to the John Hunter Hospital by rescue helicopter. The highway was closed for about 40 minutes while the patients were loaded. The soldiers were on their way back from Singleton Army Base where they'd collected a load of supplies. Their reserve unit, which is based at Adamstown, is camping in the nearby Belford State Forest. Last Sunday night, a female was killed when the station wagon she was a passenger in collided with a 4-wheel drive on the same bend. Tonight, one of the injured remains in a critical condition. His 20-year-old companion is serious. If the tariffs are imposed, it will effectively triple the price of Italian, German and French white wines for American consumers. Well placed to take advantage of this is the Hunter Valley, according to Dom McWilliams, who launched a new range of wines at his Mount Pleasant vineyard today.
Yeah, I think there'll be a bit of an open market for us because we will be in that competitive market that the French have always had domineering.
But there is another side to this argument. At present, Australia competes in a market relatively free of trade barriers. If the tension, though, between the US and the European community escalates, those free markets would disappear, leaving our winemakers struggling to compete. According to the Winemakers Association, the Europeans have stocked their US warehouses in anticipation of the tax. Also, most Australian wines are in different market niches to the affected European product. The association says it's concerned that the trade tension will upset the balance, which is currently being advantageous to the Australian wine industry.
Get that? You enjoy rubbing it in, don't you? What's up, Pop?
The idea of the Central Coast Aero Club grew wings among friends in a hotel bar in 1972. The dream was carved from bush at Warnervale soon after, filling a need in the area.
Well, at the time that these people got together, there was no airfield between Cooranbong or Cessnock, Arapelican and Bankstown, so there was no facility, public facility or otherwise, here on the Central Coast.
The airfield hosted a horde of planes today as they zoomed in from as far away as Coffs Harbour and the Riverina to commemorate 20 years of takeoffs and landings at the club. With 60 sets of wings in one place, a round of the New South Wales Inter-Club Flying Challenge was held. Among the categories were flower bombing and accuracy landing, all under the watchful eyes of the judges. Rob Britton says while the competition's fun, it heightens safety and skills among the pilots, which could help save lives in an emergency.
The object of these exercises conducted as a competition is to allow pilots to maintain a currency in those exercises during a fun sequence.
In the old river port of Morpeth, there's a sense that time has stood still. Except for this weekend, when the time is in 3/4 or 4/4, as folk music wafts from church halls and sheds.
Fisheries officers met with recreational and commercial anglers at Ballina today to discuss the results and implications of a marine and estuarine stocktake of the Richmond and Clarence rivers. The study probed fish habitats in a bid to ascertain just who's catching what and where, which up until now has been open to speculation. The report identified an increasing number of recreational anglers wetting their lines, as well as more sophisticated fishing equipment, putting what's been a fairly static fish population under more stress. It also seems that many of the little ones that should be thrown back are being tucked into the bag. The long-term effect is a reduction in breeding stocks. Studies are being carried out statewide as a foundation to set catch limits on most species. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.
There were lineups of a different type at Newcastle Police Station, with the public getting a chance to see what goes on behind the counter. Inside, it was a different world, the cells getting a little overcrowded as parents and children got a taste of life behind bars. The station was packed, but there was no security risk, as police made sure everyone was in range. And in case any child got lost, Mum didn't have far to look, the fully equipped police car and motorbike proving the popular meeting place. And in Hamilton, the blessing and opening of the multi-million-dollar extensions to St Francis Xavier's College. A new technology block, administration building, art rooms and laboratories were heralded, the culmination of more than 7 years and $5 million worth of work.
The Gloucester Youth Self-Achievement Program was started 7 years ago. In that time, it's helped around 200 students. It's a Rotary Club initiative and is run in conjunction with the local high school. This year, just over 40 Year 10 students participated in the RISAP program.
They learn about themselves. They learn more than anything else that if they've got a skill and they've got an ability, and to take that skill and that ability as far as they possibly can. And they get the motivation for that by looking at other successful people in the community.
One of the key sessions over the weekend is the talk given by former students who are doing well in their chosen careers. As well as real-life motivational talks, there's fun and games which show the students how important it is to work together. There's personal grooming, job interview tips and a formal dinner where the students are the guests of honour. The scheme has been adopted by a Canadian Rotary Club and the word is spreading locally. Already it's being run in Taree and Wingham. The key to its success is community cooperation.
Until now, the lake has had the part-time coverage of 2 ageing police boats stationed at Toronto and Belmont, along with the Volunteer Coast Guard and Coastal Patrol bases at Swansea and Pelican. Under the plan, 2 water police officers from Newcastle will be based full-time at Wangi, along with personnel from stations around the lake to keep a boat at the ready until late each night. Launch Stackpool from Newcastle will also patrol the lake, subject to tides and bridge openings.
We're basically using Launch Belmont as a main vessel and Launch Toronto as a backup.
The trials should also identify the number of boats needed to adequately police the lake. The 2 boats used on a part-time basis may be replaced by 1. Last year, the police turned out to 1,500 calls for assistance. Just last weekend, they made a number of trips offshore to tow in broken-down boats.
Let me make it quite clear. We are not a glorified towing service. It's not to be perceived as such. My main aim is that the police out there become rather more proactive in preventing crime and preventing antisocial behaviour on the lake.
Well, let's get one thing straight. The best bet of the day wasn't even on the track. It was a guessing competition. $2,000 the prize for a $1 investment. All proceeds going to the men and women in orange. The other big winner today, the licensee. As the mercury spilled over, punters made for the shade and drinks disappeared. Well, they had to, otherwise they'd have evaporated. No doubting the horses preferred the stable to the steam, and judging by the barometer, it was too hot to boogie. They call it the sport of kings, but the castle was looking a bit dilapidated. Scoop of the day, we found out what the next Vice President of the United States has been doing to make ends meet in the meantime. Wonder how much he had on Clinton. 42 registered clubs between Maitland and Murrurundi combined to conduct the race day. The main event, race 7 over 1,550 metres. The placings in the Class 2 handicap, 5, 11 and 1.
The demand for Hunter Valley coal is expected to increase by 8 million tonnes in the next 3 years. To cope with the jump in production, an extra 350 wagons are being built by Newcastle company Bradken Consolidated. It won the tender to build the bogies for the carriages. A bogie is the set of wheels which sits underneath the coal wagon. State Rail today accepted delivery of the first 14 coal wagon bogies from Bradken. While the wheels are being made in Newcastle, the upper part of the wagons are being manufactured in Wollongong. They'll carry 95 tonnes of coal, 30% more than they presently do. The wagons should be operational by mid-1993. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The body of Donna Espy was found in the kitchen of her Taylor Street home on Sunday night. She'd been stabbed repeatedly and was discovered by her parents, who'd arrived to deliver Miss Espy's 6-year-old daughter. Last night, police arrested Bradley Jonathan Marks of Fern Valley Road, Cardiff, and charged him with Miss Espy's murder. Marks today faced Magistrate Robert Stent in a packed courtroom. The rage of the family and friends of Miss Espy was uncontrollable. They howled as Marks was led into the court, calling him a stinking mongrel, a bastard, and shouting that he rot in hell. At one stage, the father of the victim shouted, "Give me a gun." It was then that Magistrate Stent adjourned the court. When the court was reconvened, Marks was refused bail and was remanded in custody for another hearing on December the 1st. The distraught relatives of the victim were escorted from the courthouse. The dead woman's mother collapsed near the police station and an ambulance was called. Matthew White, NBN News.